Hi, welcome to Ask the Manager. We have Clare O'Connor with us today. Now, Clare is not a relative of mine, but we just happen to have the last name the same. Clare's retired from Boston College, and she was a professor at Boston College. Am I giving you the right title?
Yes.
Okay, and she had been a scientist at the Worcester Foundation for Experimental Biology for many years before she went to BC. And now she's keeping herself busy doing all sorts of things. She's retired from the Finance Committee. How many years were you on the Finance Committee?
16.
16 years on the Finance Committee. And it was like I lost my right arm when she left, but she remained a town meeting member in Precinct 1?
Yep.
Precinct 1. And now she teaches classes, because it's in her blood to teach, at the library. And you're chairman of the library trustees.
Yes.
And when you teach the classes at the library, what do you teach? What do you talk about?
I talk about genes and DNA. We've done a number of things like, your DNA ancestry kit. We've talked about the genetics of cancer. I try to find topics that I think the public will be interested in. These are topics I used to develop in a course for non-majors at Boston College. Last night we did the microbiome. That was a lot of fun.
So it was a lot of fun for Claire, but do you think we could understand what you were talking about?
Absolutely, because it's geared
You
for
bring it down to our level?
No prior experience necessary.
Oh, good. So, and you teach these once a month?
Once a month on the second Wednesday.
Second Wednesday. So if you want information about that, go to the library website?
That's right, yep.
Okay, so you could go once a month and learn something that you'd never imagined you'd be able to understand. But I'm sure you're a good teacher. You've been doing that for many years. So we have a lot of questions, but before we start with that, there was a tragedy in Worcester, a Worcester firefighter who got killed. Christopher Roy was a Shrewsbury resident, and his daughter goes to school in town. How has that affected Shrewsbury firefighters and employees?
Yeah, so I mean, it really hits us all whenever one of our colleagues goes down. I received news that morning from Chief Vona as the Shrewsbury Fire Department went to the Worcester stations to just man the station. They did not arrive on the scene. But then as the information progressed and we learned that he did pass away, then we start to get more information. So as we were all talking that morning, Chief Vona was at Worcester Fire Headquarters, kept relaying information to me. And then we were able to get in touch with Dr. Sawyer once we knew that there were Shrewsbury residents and there was a child in the district, but he had already known by the time that I called him, and he was on the phone with Tiffany Ostrander, who's the principal. So really had a direct impact on a lot of us early that morning, and then it's something that's in the back of their minds all the time, and we provide support to them and have employee assistance programs in place for them to be able to speak with counselors, or any employees to be able to speak with counselors. So we have that in place. And then actually tomorrow, won't be tomorrow when this airs, but on Friday, December 13th. 14th, thank you. We're having Wear Red for Roy's.
Oh.
And so employees in the town and school departments will be wearing red and making contributions to the trust fund. So.
And anyone who wishes to can also make contributions.
That's right, to the Worcester Firefighter Credit Union. They have a trust fund set up for Ava, who is a fourth grader at Coolidge Elementary.
Very sad, very upsetting. So there's no way to transition from that, but we'll try. So Claire, I know we want to talk about the water treatment plant first.
Yes, I think that's top on everybody's mind. There's been a lot of notices going out about well, for months now we've had, don't use your water for several hours a day because we were doing some kind of flushing going on. And then recently we heard about the chlorine smell. I don't think it's been all over town, but certainly parts of town. So I'd love to know what the status of this new plant is.
So with that introduction of Claire being a biochemist and a BC
professor, don't be paranoid.
I have to make sure I get this right, or as close to right as possible. So We did bring the new water treatment plant online in October, which we've talked about on the show before. And now we're in this process of water acclimation. And that means we're using, so the old water treatment plant, cleaned the water and disinfected the water, but it wasn't filtering the water. So we're, to remove any particular particulates, we'd air strip it for VOCs and things like that.
Volatile organics.
Volatile organic chemicals. So what we're actually doing now is running it through filters to remove the manganese from the water before it goes out into the water system. We used to sequester the manganese into a soluble state, which would prevent it from getting into people's homes. But so we're completely changing what we're doing, and water is a living organism, or close to a living organism as there can be.
That's
as
a lot of the minute.
A lot of the minute. So
More than we want.
yeah, so it's a very dynamic situation. So some of the challenges that we continue to experience during this acclimation process is some people are still receiving a little bit of sediment and grit. Some people more than others. Of manganese. So let me try to, so that's, I think, one of the biggest concerns so far, and then the second is chlorine. So on the manganese side, we're doing a fantastic job of stripping the manganese out of the source. So it's coming into the treatment plant, and we're removing it from the water. So we're not putting any new manganese out into the system. But some of our pipes still have manganese along the outsides of it. So we're now in a situation where we're not putting any chemicals into the water to keep the manganese in a steady state and not getting into the homes. So the manganese that's on the outside of the pipes is sloughing off a little bit here and there. So it's creating some bursts of manganese as it becomes into a more unstable state. And some residents, especially residents in low-lying areas where the sediment settles over the evening and things like that, builds up, and then as they use their water, it comes into their homes. So
it's funny. I live in a hilly neighborhood, and I'm at the top of the hill. My neighbors at the bottom of the hill were experiencing things that I wasn't seeing.
And that's one of the main reasons. So actually tomorrow, again, December 14th, which is very uncharacteristic because of ambient air temperatures, we actually have to flush the main on North Quinsigamond Ave because we are having such sediment problems there that we need to take kind of drastic measures, and we're going to run the water right into catch basins and have a sander and salt truck on scene so we don't ice up the roadway.
Oh, yeah.
But we need to flush that system out. So that's a challenge that's ongoing. So again, we're doing really good. We're removing it from the source water, but there's still some accumulation within the system that's sloughing off and making its way into homes.
Can I ask
Sure.
a couple questions about it? How far above the recommended level is the water that's coming into the treatment plant to begin with? Just mildly?
No, it's pretty significant over the level
The
when
recommended
it comes
levels,
in. The
okay.
raw that's coming in before we're treating it. The recommended level is 0.05. And it's parts per million, and it's actually when we're bringing it in, it's between 0.3 and 0.5.
Okay, so 10 times more.
Yeah, 10 times more than actually is acceptable. So again, we're getting it all out of the system, but there is that residual that had built up over years within the system that we're now challenged with, and we will be challenged with while we acclimate, over the next months.
Can I, one more question, I'm trying to remember from town meeting. Is it a biological process you're using to remove the manganese? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we're
This is a quiz.
Yeah,
it's not like a filter like we know. Well, I'm just interested.
Yeah, so it's a polished sand-based filter that we grow bacteria in. We actually, instead of we set the pH level to an appropriate amount to allow the bacterium to grow, and it actually attaches itself to the manganese and gets caught up in the sand. Then we backwash the sand filter, to a certain extent, not to kill all the bacteria, but to remove the clumps of manganese, so they're not going out into the system anymore. So we're speeding up the process where organisms attach themselves to the manganese, and they're catching them and then disposing of it into the sewer system.
Yeah, amazing what you can get
It
those
is.
microbes to do.
Yes.
And what happens to the organisms?
They get flushed out into the sewer and disposed of, and no longer a concern to us. They go into the sewer treatment process and are removed, through that chemical process in Westboro. So then the second real challenge that we've been having recently as we acclimate this system is the chlorine odor and taste that is making its way out to some homes. And so we started to experience this, but it was a little counterintuitive what was happening, and maybe very intuitive to a scientist. But we certainly have scientists and engineers that are running the plant that jumped on top of this right away. But so DEP requires us to put in a certain amount, I think it's 0.04 parts per million of chlorine, and it has to have a contact time with the water for 2 hours at that level before we're allowed to distribute it out into the system. So when we built the new water treatment plant, we had this clear well set up that has a series of channels that ensures the water flows for 2 hours through all these baffles before it's distributed out into the rest of the water treatment system. So the chlorine's injected before that at the proper ratio, and it sets and it kills all the harmful organisms and viruses, etc. And then we distribute it out. So
It's got to be a lot of volume too for the
Yes.
whole town of Shrewsbury, right?
it is. Our
Yeah.
clear well that clear well that we have holds 700,000 gallons of
Wow.
water at one time.
Okay, and it
we're-
turns over every couple hours.
It does, because we pump 4 million gallons of water a day for the
impressive
entire
numbers.
for the entire town. So so it's going out the door with the proper dosage, out the pipe into the system at the proper dosage. But going back to my previous comment, we have all this organic material built up around the outside of our pipes. So that free chlorine, the old chlorine that we used to use, chlorine gas, would actually attach itself to the manganese and then ride on the manganese throughout the system.
Interesting.
So we don't have manganese in the
Yeah,
water anymore. So the chlorine is attacking all those organisms and organics, that are along the outside of the pipes, and they're being used up more rapidly than is desirable. And when chlorine moves from its free state and attacks the organisms, it becomes a chloramine, and the chloramine has the odor and taste that people are experiencing. So the counterintuitive part isn't that, why is the town over adding chlorine to the water? We're actually not adding enough to be able to get it in a free enough state throughout the entire
So what
system.
people are smelling is not chlorine gas, it's chloramine.
It is.
Yeah, okay, so
Yep.
that's a big difference.
It
Yeah.
is, yep.
Which means,
It's been reacted, into another form.
So-
Somehow nitrogen has entered into the picture and what have you.
Yeah.
so there.
Yeah. so it's further. I wish that it was that simple, but it's further challenged on the topography and geography of our water distribution system. So we have 3 zones. So the low pressure zone in the North Quincy, South Quincy area, that section of town, that elevation of town, that receives its water directly, just through gravity. We have very good chlorine readings. So what was happening in the homes that were experiencing the smell, we were actually testing the water and getting 0 chlorine because it was all used up, so therefore we had the smell. So in the low pressure zone, really good. We're able to have a residual chlorine value coming out of the tank exactly as is prescribed by the EPA and DEP. But as we pump to the reduced high and the high pressure, that water sits in above ground storage tanks, which this time of the year is exposed to ambient air temperatures that are very low, which reduces the effectiveness of chlorine.
The whole equilibrium
Yes.
shifts, yes.
So as the effectiveness of chlorine is reduced, and then it is further used up once it gets into those pipes with organics, we've been unable to get chlorine to acclimate through the entire 206 miles of just mains, and then all the other miles of laterals that goes in and services that goes into everyone's homes. So for those two complex but simple reasons, during the acclimation process, people have experienced change in the water system, which we're working on every day. It's driving us crazy. We don't like to receive the phone calls, and we're taking, being as aggressive with increasing the chlorine to the water, to keep it safe for the folks early in the system and not have too high of levels to reach that balance and equilibrium that we need at the far end of the system. But because of temperature and those other things, we're really challenged at this point. Acclimation will take several more months, but we're working as aggressively as possible to keep the water safe to drink. As you said, the chloramines are not, it's not chlorine gas that's coming out of
we don't want
people's
that.
things. We don't want that at all. But that's not what's happening. So, the sediment is because the pipes are shedding a little bit on the inside, the manganese that had built up, and the chlorine smell is because the chlorine's doing what it's supposed to do and attacking organics to keep the water safe, but it's being used up quicker than we want it to.
Yeah.
So it's a biological process.
Yes.
The town has a handle on it.
Yes.
You're trying to perfect what's happening, and the bottom line is the water's safe to drink.
It is, yes.
And I was at the website the other day for the water department. They seem to have kind of a workaround. You could use something like a charcoal filter. I lived in Washington, D.C. for a year, and boy, did you need a filter. But the other thing is to just pour it out because it's volatile, so it's going to come out. I compare it to aerating your wine.
Yeah.
If you would just aerate your water, you get rid of that smell.
Yeah, so, through the refrigerator-based charcoal filter that a lot of folks have, if you're drinking your water out of the refrigerator, we've heard from folks that, I turn on the kitchen faucet and I have the odor, but I get the water out of the refrigerator across the room and it doesn't have the odor. That's because it just went through that charcoal process. A conventional charcoal-based filter in a pitcher, or, Claire, as you said, just putting it into a pitcher and putting that plain old pitcher in your refrigerator and letting it sit for a little while, it'll scrub itself off. Yeah. So a lot of fun stuff.
Good
Perfect
luck.
guest.
That sounds really interesting,
Sounds like
actually.
a really complex equilibrium.
Yeah.
So,
But I bet
and these
that-
are relatively new wells, right? These are
We're
we dug
continuing.
these a few years ago.
Yeah, we're continuing to replace the wells that have the highest manganese to areas that have lower manganese, that have, we had some contamination with, hex chrome, so we're moving away from
That
those
was
wells.
close to those industrial sites. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are digging new wells and putting new wells in to make that source water as clean as possible, but now we have this wonderful biological filter that is actually able to attack hex chrome and eliminate that as well too. So the spectrum that we can use the bacterium and that right pH level and get it to grow and work as hard and fast as possible is far better than any chemical process we can introduce. So it's
Gonna have
amazing.
to learn what that bacterium is.
Yes, I don't know the name of it, but
I
we
wasn't
can
going
get
to
it
put
to
you on the spot for that.
It's developed by Suez. Suez is the largest water company in the world. So it was developed in Europe, and they use it there versus the green sand filtration that's used in the United States a lot. So this is, as I've mentioned before, the largest plant of its type on the East Coast, and the second largest in the country, only to Lake Havasu, Arizona.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
And the manganese level that we were always concerned about, now when it comes out into our system, it's 0 or close to 0.
We are not detecting it until the thousandths part per million.
Way below that 0.05 level that you talked about.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And before people freak out about manganese, we need it in our bodies. We've got enzymes who use it as an essential cofactor. So, we don't want 0 manganese.
Okay.
Yeah.
See that?
Important to know. Yeah.
First advocate for manganese.
See that?
Well, in small quantities, but we
Correct,
do need it. Yeah.
Okay, and you've also refurbished about 6 or 8. How many wells have you refurbished?
Oh yeah, I think right in the middle, 7 wells that we've been refurbishing, and that includes redrilling them and resanitizing them and cleaning them with disinfectants, and then reacclimating them and introducing them back into the system. And now all wells do go through the treatment plant. Not everyone. The Sewell Street wells didn't have any VOCs or anything that needed scrubbed off, but now they all go into the same system, and we're learning about those chemistries.
Now, 2 town managers ago, which means Mr. Carney, when he was retiring, the main focus that he spoke about was that we needed to pay attention to our water. And since he's been gone, we've been paying attention to our water all those years. So through Dan as our town manager and now you, we're still focusing on water. I believe that we'll always be focusing on water because there'll always be changes. But it's complex, and you have qualified people handling all of that. And it's very important to have the right people in those positions.
That's right.
An unrelated question with water, what about capacity? It seems to me like the town is growing quite a bit and what have you. Do we foresee the need for any additional wells in the near future? Or?
So right now we're capped at our maximum withdrawal levels for our water withdrawal permit. So that's one of the reasons that we have to contain growth, and we have some limitations on the sewer side of things. So we don't have the ability to just install a new well. As we're drilling these new wells, we're actually replacing wells. We're not able to add in total capacity because of our maximum water withdrawal permit as issued by DEP. We do still have unaccounted for water. It's a challenge that we have to overcome.
And how much is that now?
It's been on average about 30% per year. So
It
we
used
need
to be 50, as I recall. So there's been some improvement.
Yeah, we need to address that issue, which obviously is free capacity within that system that we can use. So we're really confident, though, that it's not a physical break, that it's something within our calibration between our end user meters, which we have almost 11,000, and our main meter. So bringing the new treatment plant, the main meter at the treatment plant, bringing the new treatment plant online is a good first step. And the next step that we'll take on the data side of things is go into monthly water billing effective July 1st of this coming year.
Oh, okay.
And then we've already been in conversations with a lot of, I'll call them water tech companies, water metering companies, about their artificial intelligence that they can then install and monitor different aspects of our pressure zones and bounce those off of the meter readings and help us determine where that unaccounted for water is. They've had a lot of companies with a lot of success in changing non-revenue or unaccounted for water levels in communities through this data comparison and compilation. But they can only do that if it's monthly billing. So we really need to get to that because you may be pumping water on May 1st that you're being billed for and we're tabulating on July 15th.
Yeah.
It's just way too much of a lag to really determine where our issues are. So we'll narrow it down.
What about the convenience of billing? Some people pay by check, some people pay online.
Yep.
Is that going to get really complicated for your office to do?
No, so monthly billing I think is consistent with a lot of type of bills that you have. So hopefully it's easier for customers not to have to wait every quarter, but we'll be able to process it. We'll have 100% online billing where you can view and pay your bill online, and hopefully it makes it easier for everyone. So we'll have to adjust. Not the rate as far as how much money we're going to raise, but we'll have to right size those water bands so we make sure that we're encouraging conservation and all those things once we go to the monthly billing versus the quarterly amounts that are allotted.
Yeah.
Do all of your departments have online billing now?
Yes, everything can come in through the treasurer's office. Building permits to tax bills can all be paid online. We have online bill presentment and everything. We're getting there.
See that?
Yeah.
We used to worry about the bills were produced somewhere out of town, at a college actually, if I recall, and then they'd have to come to town, and it was such a complex process. And now the online billing, I think, makes it easy for everyone, not just the town, but for the people paying their bills.
Is there still a credit card charge for the online billing?
There
used to be.
yeah.
Okay.
So debit or credit, depending, there's a charge for each. The debit fee, the ACH fee with the debit card's less than a stamp, so that's where we like to keep it.
Yeah.
So you can folks still like to bring it in. We still accept cash and checks over the counter, but more and more. You know, Selco.
Goats, do you accept goats? Can they?
Yeah, no bartering, no bartering or trades of those varieties.
Yeah.
But you know, Selco, you know, was a model that we followed. They have over 60% of their customers are 100% online, so we're trying to get to that level as well. So that makes it easier for us because we can deal with things in batches versus, you know, single bills.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And probably month to month is a lot steadier as far as the budget. I can
Yeah.
see that there's some advantages to that
Yeah,
as well.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So conservation is so important, right? And we
Absolutely.
didn't have a drought this year after many years of drought, but I suppose you want to remind people that no matter how much
right.
rain is coming down,
Yeah.
you know, it's really important to still keep conserving.
Yeah, it's so important. You know, we really got in a bind with the droughts, and that's when we started pulling a lot of manganese into the water system. But it's important to keep those aquifers full and only use, you know, water for essential purposes all the time, because, you know, with the weather patterns changes and climate changes, we're going to have these years of heavy rains, and then we're going to go into years of multi-year droughts. So, you know, in the good times and the bad, we've got to try to keep things steady and be ready for that next bad cycle.
Are the aquifers pretty well replenished after all the rain that we had this fall?
So we have gravel-packed aquifers over there in the area of the water treatment plant, and yeah, we're much higher, much cleaner levels. You know, we're not
Good.
as taxed as we were.
Yeah.
Now, Bob Tedeschi's been here for quite a few
years.
years, and I know he's younger than me. But he's getting closer to retirement. Do you have people packed up in the batting order, ready to replace him when he does get ready to go? Because he lives and sleeps and breathes water. If you talk to him, it's like, okay, Bob, enough about the water. I mean, that's his thing. So do you have people?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it much, to be honest with you. We certainly have a lot of skilled staff that are water operators and, you know, run the plants for us on a day-to-day basis. Bob hasn't given me notice, so I haven't.
No, I think he's got a couple of years to go.
I haven't really thought about it, but yeah, we'll be in the best position. We use engineering firms to support us on both the water side and the sewer side.
Who do you use now?
We use Tata and Howard on the water side and Weston and Sampson on the sewer side to really help us stay on top of capital planning and infrastructure replacement. And the water department, you know, has 6 or 8 employees. The sewer department even less. So we're not running these huge staffs.
Right.
You know. Well, for instance, on the sewer side, our annual operations are around $7 million, but almost 5 of that is a check that we cut to the town of Westboro for the treatment plant. So it's not like, you know, we have 30 or 40 employees that we deploy out when we have a water main break or something. We got 4 or 5 guys that head out there and do that work. And
regardless of the weather.
Correct. Yeah. Last New Year's Day last year, we had a bad break by the fire station. So. It's a challenge.
It's already been a year.
Yeah, that's hard to believe.
Time flies, especially as you get older.
It does.
Well, that kind of leads me to another question I wanted to ask you about. I think a lot of people aren't aware of how you're changing kind of the organizational structure of things in Shrewsbury, where it used to be that you had a tremendous number of direct reports to you, and now you've been kind of consolidating some of those departments. You want to comment on where you are in the process and how that's going?
So, I think it's going very well. We're finally, with the retirement of Bob Cox on November 30th, we're pretty close to being in the new organizational model that we'll use for the Department of Public Works, which will include engineering, ultimately water and sewer, parks, recreation, cemetery, and public buildings or public facilities. So we took the parks and cemetery and recreation department and combine that with the public buildings department to create a public facilities department. So now Angela Snell oversees all aspects of those very maintenance oriented and infrastructure oriented departments. That whole department, including all the rest of those areas, have been separated into divisions. So where we had department heads in the past, we now have division directors that are more field focused than the department heads, but they're all supported by Jeff Howland, who's the DPW director. So he's, responsible ultimately for that entire suite of public infrastructure areas: engineering, highway, water and sewer, parks and cemetery, and public buildings. So It's really a system that provides for upward mobility of our staff. I think it right sizes staff and gives people very high level supervisory and leadership support through Angela and Jeff. And
I just want to comment from the library's point of view.
Yep.
We're thrilled.
Oh,
They're
good.
doing such
Yeah.
a good job with maintaining the building and what have you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Because that's been for just a few years
right,
now.
right. It used to be separate, but then it became
Right.
town.
They
it
benefited
came out
by-
of the town budget instead of the library budget. and
Right.
it's- But
Yeah.
we had a trustees meeting 2 nights ago, and Ellen Dolan was just commenting on how
Good.
well things are working over there.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I mean, we did all that without adding staff. We added 1 full-time equivalent within 1.5 full-time equivalents to the entire organization. So one of the key aspects of that is a business management division that will be responsible for the billing, the payroll, in the future the data and the data analysis of all those different departments. We used to have very vertical stovepipe organizations where highway did their own payroll and engineering did their own payroll and water and sewer did their own payroll. Now we're bringing the economies of those areas of expertise together and pushing that through clerks and assistants that work with under one business manager, and it's provided a lot of efficiency and economy there versus everyone doing it on their own.
So in the big picture, what would you say to people that don't understand the effectiveness of this reorganization? What do you say to them, because their perception is that you've now made it top-heavy management, which I don't believe you have, but there are people that misunderstand and believe that you've done that.
Right. So
How do you simply explain that?
So I think the simplest way to put it is where we used to have 4 department head level positions, we now have 2. And where we used, now we have, from a salary standpoint and a responsibility standpoint, we now have 6 division managers that are working on a day-to-day basis to lead those different aspects of the organization. Very technical oriented people, have supervisory skills as well, but we've changed from kind of having 4 department heads to 2 department heads that are supported by the same number of people underneath them. So we certainly, like I said, didn't add positions. We added mid-management level and reduced top management level folks, and it really is going to line up well with a performance-based system that we'll use, setting goals and priorities and streamlining our budget through goal and priority processes versus kind of doing running from task on a day-to-day basis and kind of doing what we did in the previous years.
So in the transition, has it been a smooth transition, or have there been roadblocks?
It's been very smooth so far. We have some physical constraints. We're in the process now of where we're ready to move people, and it's really a domino effect because we've got to unlock one cube, which is creating a new office for some IT folks. We're taking over a former underutilized space, and IT will go there, and then that'll allow us to a set of changes where we'll swap offices, and Angela Snell will go upstairs from the main level and be with her DPW colleagues. And but we've hit a little roadblock because we need to do a little bit of a fit out of an office space, put up some drywall. And
But you're
stuff
talking about one office space.
that we're creating, correct? Yeah. Everything else will remain the same in the existing offices.
Yeah, I sort of recall that you've expanded the role of the assistant town manager too.
Yes. So
That seemed to be kind of key to this
yeah, it's
organizational
critical.
plan.
Yeah. So that's part of how we'll manage a little bit differently than we have in the past. So Kristen Last, the assistant manager, is now responsible for all community development functions. So the council on aging, planning, economic development, the building inspectors department, and works closely with Ellen at the library to make sure we're managing those community development activities as a program versus, again, individual departments. So we still have the same departmental structures, but that's all under her responsibility and authorities. Then I have the rest of it, public safety and public works, administration and finance, that those department heads report directly to me. So, and then December, we have department head meetings the first Friday of every month, and we held those monthly. December is our last one that we're going to hold monthly department head meetings. We're going to move to quarterly, and we are moving into more functional leadership teams. So we'll have a community development leadership team, we'll have an administration and finance leadership team, we have an executive leadership team and a public safety leadership team, and that'll bring division managers, department heads, and other staff together to solve problems across those functional areas and not just within their individual departments. So we have really experienced and highly qualified employees across the organization, and why should we keep their skills within one department? Let's allow them to work on problems and innovations across all the related functional areas, just not one area.
Get some nice synergy going there.
It is, yeah, we really will. So that's really, we're moving in that direction as far as meetings go on January 1st.
Do you anticipate changes in the public safety structure?
Not at this point. On the public safety team, it's the fire chief, the police chief, the emergency management director are the key staff there, and those will remain the same into the near future.
Oh. So how will this affect budget hearings? Being finance committee minded, do they all come in for the budget hearings, or do just the two department heads? How will that work?
So I don't know if it'll happen this year, but I would really like to have those functional teams come in, present program-based budgets, and talk about how we provide services to citizens rather than talk about individual line items. So I'd love to talk about, like the senior center and the library both have memory cafes and provide those services to that demographic. And then, so I'd like to talk about, areas and aspects of the how we spend our money on that basis versus office supplies and other expenditures. So
How would the finance committee have oversight to those other?
Well, we certainly can drill down into any line item that we need to, but we want to be able to present our priorities on what we're trying to accomplish and then how we're allocating money to accomplish that. And then as questions arise of, well, why is it $300,000 for you to provide this type of service? Then we'll dig down and say, well, within the library, we're allocating $80,000 to children's level services, or whatever it is, and we can drill down in. But I think it's better to talk about what it is that we're doing and why we're allocating resource in particular areas, than jump right into the individual line items within the budget. Because those little pieces are hard to, it's hard to see what we're actually trying to accomplish.
So I'm probably jumping the gun, but will you be adding employees to any particular departments in the next budget?
I haven't received budget requests yet from
I'm
departments.
jumping the gun.
So those all come in on Monday. I think public safety, there'll be clear requests for that, another police officer and more firefighters. So I think those have been ongoing discussions that we've been having with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, so there may be some staff increases there. I think the rest of the departments as they sit right now, we have a couple of vacancies and changes that we put into the FY19 budget that we haven't been able to make yet, whether we're having recruitment issues or other challenges. So across the balance of the rest of the budget, I don't see a lot of FTE changes. But as we move into more of this functional team-based environment, I think we'll find more efficiencies among existing staff to be able to redeploy resources in different areas rather than needing more staff members.
Should town meeting members and the finance committee expect the budget to look different this year as a consequence of all these reorganizations?
So it'll look different in some ways because we'll have a Department of Public Works budget that will contain the administrative functions in the business management division, but we'll still have a highway area and a public buildings area. So I think if you want to get into that line item level of the budget, you'll still be able to do that. We're trying to streamline processes internally. There's a lot of start and stops where we had to manually enter figures and stuff several occasions rather than one integrated budget document. So we're just received a grant for $30,000 from through the Lieutenant Governor's Administration of our Community Compact Cabinet program that we'll use to create a more transparent budget tool and process. We won't use it for FY20, which is the year we're working on, but we'll use it for FY21. So probably FY21 you'll see differences. FY20 will be a little bit different than last year, but mostly the same. We've already produced one new tool that's available on the town manager's page. It's called a revenue manual. And that provides more increasingly detailed layers about where the town receives all its money from and how it receives it and why we're allowed to receive those revenues. So there's a recap of the FY19 budget. There's a one-page executive summary of what we think FY20 is going to look like, and then about 40 more pages of detailed revenue forecasting tools and statutory authorities to really detail.
And it's
So
up, up there now.
It's up there now
Great.
for FY20 already. So if you want to take the 1-minute version, the 15-minute version, or the 2-hour version, it's there for you as far as the revenue goes, as we see them right now and how we're projecting. For me, it all starts with the revenues in the local government, because those are all defined statutorily, and then we've got to work our expenses to live within our means, and that's what we're doing now in the budget process.
Yeah, and I realized that you changed the calendar of the hearings this year. They were
They're a
pushing it
little late.
back a little.
Yep.
Well,
Same
Donna
as
and I
last.
went,
Yep.
that could be.
Yep.
I've been off the finance committee a few years, but one of the big problems as I saw it was, you never knew what was happening in Boston, and
Right.
and that's why we were living with uncertainty for
Yep.
every week. What's above the line, what's below the line, and it was
Right.
constantly changing. Are we getting any clearer answers from Boston as to what we might expect to hear? Or?
So I actually had a meeting earlier today and received an update from the executive director of the Massachusetts Municipal Association. So revenues in Boston are really good. As far as projections, actuals versus projections, so we're trending ahead about almost $500 million, roughly halfway through the fiscal year, so we're in a really good position.
Is gambling helping?
Gambling's helping a little bit. Marijuana's going to start to help a little bit. The general over economic conditions. There is then uncertainty coming on January 1st as everyone starts to actually pay their tax returns, and how the changes to the federal tax code in 2017 will really impact individual taxpayers and what decisions they'll make in the future because of that $10,000 cap on state
SALT.
and local exemptions. There's reasons to be optimistic, but a lot of unknowns that are coming out there. One of the reasons that I think it's beneficial for us to be a little more delayed is that first budget projection that we'll push out there will have the governor's budget numbers in there rather than an estimate of what they will be. And I know it was in a lot of the initial projections prior to that, but I really want to make sure we have that number in place before we push it out there. And the whole idea behind the revenue manual is to signal, indicate, and get buy-in early in the process. The school department is always right to produce a budget that illustrates what they think they need to operate the school and provide the educational services to best ability that they could do so. And oftentimes that's more money than we have. All the time it's more money than we have. Every department does that, but putting that revenue manual out there early makes everyone get more realistic to live within our means earlier in the process. So that's the entire goal. There'll always be changes. Something's always going to change on March, such and such a date that'll allow us to add revenues, or we'll have to pull something back. But the more stable and consistent the process is throughout, I think the better off we'll be. Then it won't look like there's infighting or uncertainty or incompetency that's going on, which there never has been. But I think we're putting ourselves in a better position to appear that way.
Nice and transparent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like this manual is recommended reading.
It is, yeah. I actually imposed it upon the Shrewsbury High School American Government class.
Oh,
I went there and
great.
spoke to them last week, and we had a good conversation about it, so that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So tax rate has gone down 11 cents, but the valuations have gone up. So your bill will be higher.
It will be, yep.
So people have talked about, oh, my taxes have gone up. The valuation's gone up.
Correct.
So therefore your bill will be higher.
Right, yep. So we continue to have fantastic property value and new growth within the community. New growth within fiscal year was almost 1.6 million, which is amazing. And the total valuation of all property in town is now over $6 billion, which is great. So we're in a solid position, but we're seeing the uncertainty in the markets and potentially the economy, so we'll have to just watch that and be conservative.
Have you seen the benefit of the tax that we get from all the additional restaurants? Have you seen that now?
We're seeing consistent levels now, more consistent than we did last year, yeah, but meals tax revenues are up over prior years. So it doesn't look like restaurants are competing with each other. There's just, the whole tide is raised higher. Yeah.
Because we talk about growth in general, I just see bulldozers everywhere, or backhoes, and a lot of building going on still, and then you got some big projects going on, like the Route 20 project.
Yeah.
So what do you think is happening with population in general? Because I remember we used to always, particularly trying to figure out what school needs were, you had these projections from the state, and I think they're blown out the window by now, the ones we were using 10 years ago. What do you think's happening?
So population in general continues on the steady increase. I think the school projections through 2025 or 2030 would be another 200 elementary age, or 200 kids in total, which is huge. That's the size of some elementary schools in the state, so we'll be adding that on.
Small by our standards here.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, but we continue to be desirable, and as you've seen throughout the town, a lot of older or not so old, even smaller homes are being torn down, and duplexes are being put up, which doubles, in theory, the number of families that will reside on that lot. So that's a challenge, but we track it very closely, which is really interesting to me, the level of effort and the granularity that Kristen Lass and the planning department tracks. We do it by development, so we know that 1990 subdivision was put in, how much we're still getting out of that, and it's interesting to see turnovers and as empty nesters are moving out, families are moving back in, so we certainly have no problem replacing that. But we also are tracking, we know, I want to say it's 18 kids are coming from the apartments in the Lakeway Commons development. So we have that level of granularity, which gives us great certainty, which helps us with our projections and where we're going to need services in the future. But you alluded to it. Yeah, we are very fortunate. We received a Mass Works grant of $3,750,000 that we'll use to make improvements at the Lake Street intersection.
Did we expect more than that?
We requested more.
5, right?
It was
5 million?
4.2 million.
So why didn't they give us that?
That's a great question. We'll have to get on the phone. So we're going to be able to make traffic improvements in Route 20 and the Lake Street intersection, which will enable the Edgemere Drive-In redevelopment. So
When will that
a lot
start?
of growth. We hope that they go into permitting, in the month of January or February, so we can start pushing on them now because we have the word back on that MassWorks grant. Another reason and incentive for them to move sooner rather than later on that.
Do they know how that's going to be phased with the commercial versus the residential?
I haven't seen any of those plans or that level of detail
Nobody's
at this point.
gotten there yet. Okay.
Yep.
A lot of people want that market basket coming.
Yeah. Well, I think in a lot of those situations, just like Lakeway, their phasing of the commercial physical buildings actually starts before the residential, but residential can kind of start later but get the doors open sooner. So I would imagine both components are critical as far as I understand that development, so I don't think there's any reason that they'll delay either aspect.
2018 Greater Worcester Community Health Assessment.
CHIP.
Okay, so there was some statistics in that report that showed that Shrewsbury was higher in certain categories. And what kept coming to my mind was that it's probably because the people in Shrewsbury seek more medical care or have, what would you say, better health assessment
access,
than some people say, and Worcester is in comparison, it appears, to the other communities that are in it, which are all towns, and they're all smaller than Shrewsbury, actually. So Worcester is so much bigger than Shrewsbury by population. It just surprised me that they would even bother to compare them and not just keep them in a separate category. And I don't know if they did that for political reasons, because we'd want to be all in this group together. But I think some of the issues in Worcester, not that we don't have some of those issues in Shrewsbury, but not to the extent that they are, and less maybe in other towns with smaller populations. So some of those statistics to me seemed skewed, and where it appeared that, oh, people in Shrewsbury are really unhealthy over something, and I didn't really interpret it, or I questioned that result. And what I wondered was, what are they going to do with the information now that they have it, and how does that compare to the last time they did that assessment 3 years ago?
So you're a little ahead of me on reading the document, so that's not fair.
She's a nurse.
Yeah, that one. You talk about the chemicals. I want to know about that.
So I said, so that's actually the community health assessment, and then the community improvement plan, the CHIP, will actually come in and strategically find ways to overcome these challenges. So that's one of the greatest benefits that we have to being in this Central Mass Regional Public Health Alliance, is our access, the ability to even study that and understand it. If we were a community alone, even of our size, we probably don't have those resources or dollars to be able to put this level of effort into a community health assessment. So first and foremost, having the data to start with is a huge win for the community. Then there's funds that become available through the required contributions whenever for-profit health facilities create new facilities. So the new UMass facility, Shields facility down on Main Street near 290, actually had to provide a determination of need, and then has to put so much more money into community health within the communities that it serves and access. So we can then use those funds, apply for grants through the schools, Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, the town proper, to pull some of those funds in that they're required to invest in the community and help overcome some of these challenges.
So that's great. And is that a requirement also for the Reliant building on Route 9? That'll happen too?
Yeah, so they're a nonprofit entity, but
Reliance nonprofit?
I believe so.
Oh.
I believe it's with St.
It was
V's.
the old Fallon, that became
so
Reliant.
I don't know if they're nonprofit or for-profit.
Yeah, I could be wrong.
A tenant hospital is for-profit, so that's why I'm not sure.
Yep.
And boy, those Reliant doctors act like they're for profit. So. Well, I mean, they really have.
They have a great system.
Their act together when it comes to how to manage the healthcare.
I heard that their new facility that they're building at the Auburn Mall is even more streamlined than any other facility they've ever had, as far as technology and the team-based approach to care that they use so successfully, and has a lot to do with the parent company that just bought them. I forget the name of it. It's a Midwest company, but so I heard that's an amazing facility, and we look forward to the development of this one.
Well, I always like to see restaurants, as I've always said, but I like to see healthcare facilities in town, that people don't always have to just leave Shrewsbury to go to even Worcester for some of their healthcare needs, where there's no reason not to have it here. So I find those to be positive for our town, and it's considered, what would you call it, clean business? Yeah. So, and they pay taxes.
They do pay taxes.
So it's more revenue.
Yeah. Wait, when are they opening?
So I'm not sure the timeline. I believe it's in May or June of next year. Reliance will be opening. UMass is open and operating, and they open in the fall. And slowly shifting patient care.
Oh, okay, so it's
surgeries.
partially going already.
Yeah, so the UMass facility by 290 is, the ambulatory surgery center, but the Reliance Center is a more general practice, type facility, not a surgery center.
Yeah, but there were three. It wasn't just UMass. It was. I thought Reliant was in it too, and then there was
Shields and Reliant all will do surgery based on
And
procedures there.
Their surgical procedures over time will be, although it'll be day surgery, will be more complex procedures. So they hope to do even hip replacements there at some point, which will be interesting.
Yeah, and this is part of the whole tiered-based health system that's kind of being pushed through at the state level, that when you're at a institution or a major facility like a hospital, it's more expensive. So you go to these outpatient centers, it's cheaper, and insurance plays its hand a little more and covers more of your costs, in that tiered-based environment. So.
And you don't want to get people in the hospital where you have all those antibiotic-resistant bacteria,
Yep.
if you can avoid it.
Yep,
It's
correct,
Yeah.
yep.
And so that would be a logical reason to do a hip replacement
Yeah.
because that's a big issue and
Yeah.
they do an awful lot to prevent infection
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that. But I always wonder, okay, so now you're away from the hospital and now you have complications. So now they're going to have to get an ambulance to.
Yep.
They should have a specific transport ambulance, bigger and more complex, almost like the intensive care ambulances that you see, to transport the complications to UMass or St. Bees, wherever. But that's just me being a
A
what would you
professional.
call it, a backseat driver. Shrewsbury Cable versus Comcast. Comcast is considering coming to town. Do we have a say as to whether they come or not?
No.
We don't have a say.
No. There is a very heavy-handed, favorable advantage that cable providers have through the Telecommunications Act. We certainly have the ability to negotiate a franchise agreement with them, but there is no way the local government can't protect the monopoly. Can't solely allow one aspect, even if it's its own related aspect like Selco, to be the only operator within that space.
If they were to bully their way in, because I would view it as them bullying their way into town, when there's plenty of towns that don't have what we have, why do they have to look here? But if they were, we have things where our town assets benefit tremendously, and
Tremendously.
it's all behind the
Absolutely.
scenes where
Yep.
people don't notice. So it could be our costs and our rates, it could be the revenue, the profits. We get services that, first of all, we get money,
Yes,
but from
800,000.
every year, we
Yep.
get that sum of money at town meeting. We approve it every annual town meeting, but we also have services that are provided to schools, to municipal buildings, to water and sewer.
And I'll just speak up for the library. We were discussing this the other
Right.
night. It's been amazing, and with the high-speed internet in there and the number of computers that we have, Selco has just been, a real gift to the
Yeah, I mean,
library.
we have modems and IT connectivity and internet connectivity at all of our 40 odd pump stations for sewer that all are hooked in telemetry that all allow us to monitor and manage those systems. We buy the modem, Selco hooks it up, but they don't charge us for it. That's a $1,400 per facility charge.
So we can't expect that from Comcast if they bully their way in.
No, we
we can't
can't.
say get out or give us the same.
That's right.
And so we have
There-
something
there's-
that's very good in town
Yep.
and unique to municipalities.
The federal Telecommunications Act or whatever the appropriate federal statute is, says that the most that we're allowed to ask through a franchise agreement is 5%.
Wow.
And if you see what's going on in Washington and their undermining of local access channels like the wonderful facilities that we have here, it's kind of scary what that future might bring if they were able to get in the door. I know the survey is out there. Selco has provided some good backup information to what you've said, so we'll see what
Would they
happens.
have to put down a whole set of cables? I mean, I thought
They would. Yep.
everybody's cable cutting these days. I was kind of surprised that
It's an
somebody
anomaly.
would come in there and
Yeah.
want to put
And time's
another
up. I'm sorry,
Oh.
you'll have to come back. We've had a fast hour, but thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.